Empathy. The Babylon Matrix is set up to undervalue one of the greatest treasures you could give or receive: compassionate, healing empathy. Empathy is a treasure that often enriches the giver even more than the one who receives it. This card considers several aspects of empathy, and you must discern which are most relevant to your present situation. The opposite of empathy is an exclusive focus on internal considering. So, internal considering is focusing on what you're feeling, what other people have done to you, how everything feels, weighed by the scales of your agenda. Empathy is mostly external considering, meaning it considers what is going on in others, how others feel, and how our actions, such as spoken words, may affect them. And it's amazing how many people are completely oblivious to uh, their focus being almost exclusively on internal considering and almost never bothering to externally consider. So, this is one of the reasons why self pitying folks are often uh, unconsciously quite cruel, because they're so sure that the center of the universe is their feeling and they feel like a victim. So it never occurs to them that they might add to the suffering of the world by uh, failing to do any external considering. Like they were once interviewing a psychopath, and he was going on about how he was the way he was because he wasn't treated fairly by his parents. And they're like, well, but don't you have several illegitimate children? The interviewer asked. What's going on with them? And he's just like, well, how should I know? So that's an example of, well, it's the example of the glib moral reasoning of psychopaths, but it's also an example of people who completely focus on internal consideration and lack external considering. On the other hand, empathy for others depends on empathy for yourself. So that's why they tell you in airplanes, analogously, put on your oxygen mask before you try and help another. If you're being unkind to yourself, it's going to be hard for you to have the emotional foundation to be kind to others. So if empathy for yourself is being neglected, this may be an auspicious time for some internal consideration and to empathically focus on your inner child, your shadow, or other aspects of yourself that need more compassionate attention. External considering, focusing compassionately on others, is of inestimable value. It is also one of the few reliable shortcuts out of inner neurotic torment, a state that is always dominated by internal considering. People can get further lost in neurosis by continually psychoanalyzing their childhood situations and the complexities of their present unhappiness. And excess focus on healing, an abused term in the New Age, because unless you want to consider healing in the original etymology of the word is about wholeness, I'm all for that. But none of us, if you want to live a life of service, uh, have the opportunity to heal every last wound we've ever had. Sometimes you just need to suck it up and get on with it and focus on maybe helping other people at times and not just forever healing yourself. So, an excess focus on that can become a really egocentric trap. Sometimes the best way out of unhappiness is to focus compassionately on others. And there are always others in greater pain and need than you. And even if they are not in greater pain and need, it may be of value to you to focus on them instead of yourself, as paradoxical as that sounds. For example, I made a lot of progress with my egocentrism during my 14 years as a school teacher. My default state of internal considering, because I'm an extreme introvert, was forced into external considering when I was in the classroom, because with 30 plus high energy kids in a room, there's not much possibility of drifting off into inner neurotic labyrinths. So, external considering not only benefits others, it also benefits you. In rarer cases, external considering is the default state and can even become excessive because the empathic caretaker personality neglects internal considering, neglects itself as it takes responsibility for others. Sometimes this can be because the caretaker is an old soul, a larger, more mature being relating to a needy, immature being. Now, this is completely appropriate if it's like a parent relating to an infant or a toddler. The more conscious being in a relationship has more responsibility, more response slash or dash ability, more free will. What can be especially disorienting is that the old soul young soul relationship is often in contrast to chronological age. It is not uncommon to have an old soul child who defaults into being the caretaker of a young adult or middle-aged parent. Since this relationship short circuits chronological developmental roles, it may create difficult issues for the old soul child as they grow up. It is crucial not to think of yourself as responsible for how another person feels and to realize that unless you are an adult dealing with an infant, very small child, or profoundly disabled person, you cannot and should not lifeguard anyone. Other people are self-willed, autonomous beings on their own karmic tracks. Although we can sometimes be an influence when they happen to be receptive to influence, there is no way we can assume responsibility for what they feel and experience, nor for the consequences of their choices. The attempt to lifeguard an adult infantilizes them and sets up codependencies, and just plain doesn't work. Many people lack external considering and would benefit themselves and others by focusing out more. A smaller group of people default into excess external considering and thereby weaken themselves and others. In the I Ching, the appropriate dynamic boundary between self and other is called meeting halfway. Consider this, and so just to illustrate meeting halfway, if I'm giving unasked for advice, that's almost always meeting more than halfway. If somebody asks me for advice and I don't find the time to give that when somebody I'm connected to by inner ties or where it would be very appropriate service to give that advice, that's meeting less than halfway. And so that halfway point is an ever-shifting dynamic balance between self and other. And you want to make sure that you're monitoring that so that you're not meeting less than halfway or more than halfway with folks. Consider this an auspicious time to examine the dynamic balance between internal and external considering in your life.